It says off air. Let's see if it updates.
Now we're live.
Cool. Hey everybody. This is Laravel DFW for August 2015. It actually still says off air, but hopefully this is going to be recorded. If not, then you'll see me or see this after I do the intro, I guess. But yeah, Laravel DFW. We have Daniel Puente with us today to talk about Laravel 5 and some really cool stuff that has been introduced. I'm pretty excited about it. We've been doing some really great stuff with Laravel DFW. Namely, we moved over the site to GitHub. It was already using Forge, but now we utilize it even better. We also have been doing some upgrades to how we want to do some of the things, and one of those things is that we set up a new way to publish these videos. So you'll see it underneath Laravel DFW if you go to YouTube. And so it's pretty cool. Oz and Seth have both been doing a great job co-organizing stuff with me, and so I'm pretty excited about what we're going to be doing here just even before the year ends. So without further ado, let me just introduce who's on this call right now, and then Danny, you can kind of take it away from there. So first, I'm Tanner Hearn, so I'm the organizer of Laravel DFW. Oz, you want to say hi?
Hi.
So Oz
yeah,
is a great co-organizer. Yeah. And then Seth, do you have audio? Are you like in a...
I do. I'm hanging out. I'm usually having a beer in a public place whenever we do the hangouts here. But
yeah, that's perfect.
I'll kill background noise then.
And then we have Stuart with us today, which is great. Stuart, how are you?
How's it going? It's good to have another hangout for all the non-Texans.
For sure. And last but not least, Danny, how are you today?
Pretty good, man. Everything's going pretty well today.
Well, cool. So Danny, why don't you take it away?
Real quick, guys, before we kick off, I'm on the broadcast page from the /live off of the Laravel DFW site, and it is not broadcasting. James Downer just responded there saying that he can't see a broadcast to a comment that I shot out there.
It says off air for me as well.
I'm seeing it say live. Can we try toggling that again?
Yeah, mine says live.
Yeah, mine does too, but I can't actually see the broadcast from the broadcast page.
So maybe, Osvaldo, can you hit like stop and then go live again?
Would that solve the problem? I mean, isn't it a problem with the link?
Let's see.
Maybe
Can one of you guys go to the event page, and then over on the right-hand side is the description, and there should be like links, and on there is like a YouTube link. If you grab that, that's like the most vanilla links, and if you go view that like in a, I don't know, like incognito mode or something, you should just be on YouTube and just see if it's actually broadcasting on there.
I've got two events. I've got two events for Laravel DFW. One of them is not broadcasting. That's the one James Downer is on. The other one is. So I will post that link over in the other one.
Just post Laravel DFW /live and tell them to launch from there.
Stuart, can you go to laraveldfw.com/live, and then let us know, is that the event that's going live? I'm curious if maybe somehow we got our wires crossed or something.
That one is not playing anything live.
Okay, so let's do this. We probably need to join a different group or something.
No. Don't do that. I just posted in the other one where people are at. I posted the link to the correct one.
Okay.
Yeah, that one works.
You should be hopping over here.
Okay, cool. Well, so maybe we'll have to edit this once it gets on YouTube. Okay, so we'll just keep going as if it's recording. If it doesn't record, Danny, we might be requesting you back for like December or something. It should record to YouTube, and we'll have to post it. So, Danny, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you're going to be presenting today?
Sure, let me go ahead and share my screen. Can you guys hear me okay before?
Yeah, and hey, Oz, one note, just as you're leading it, if you click on anybody's face, that is what shows up on the stream. So just make sure you like click on Danny, or you like make sure none of them are selected, just because that's what everybody will see. So
Okay.
cool. Take it away, Danny.
Give me a quick second, guys. So is it? So where's the link at now for everybody to go to?
If they go to laraveldfw.com/live, Seth said that he posted a link to the feed, so they should be able to still go to /live, and they'll just have to click a different link.
I'm actually in the process of putting it on this site right now. I dropped it into the incorrect broadcast, and I will put it in chat here.
Cool. Thank you, guys.
Okay. Sure. All right, let's go ahead and begin. So can you guys still see my screen? Just making sure we're good.
Looks good.
Awesome. All right, guys, my name is Daniel Puente. Today I'll be talking about Laravel 5, and more specifically Laravel 5 and 5.1, which kind of rolled out towards the beginning of the year. So a little bit about myself. Currently employed at MusicBed. We're based out of Keller. Software engineer, backend applications. I've been there for about a year now, and then it's a really great place to work at. The people are great. Really love the work I'm putting into it. Really, it's pretty awesome. So a little more about myself. I'm not an expert. I'm not even close. So I've been doing PHP for about 3 years or so. When I got hired onto MusicBed, my first big task was, hey, we're on Laravel 4.2 at the time, so why don't you learn that? So literally the first 2 weeks while I was there, it was just straight videos for 8 hours a day. And at first it was pretty challenging because I had no idea what was going on. But eventually it started to click and everything kind of made sense. So a year removed from that, we're kind of on Laravel 5.1 on a few of our different apps, and most of my day-to-day is in 5.1. JavaScript and jQuery, done that for a few years. In the past year, I've definitely learned a lot more than what I knew, but Stack Overflow is still my friend for sure. I'm in there all day when I have to do some JavaScript stuff, and otherwise I'll just reach out to the senior guys and they'll help me out for sure. And then when it comes to CSS stuff, I'm horrible at it. Like I wish I could be better, but honestly, that's just I don't have an eye for it. We kind of have a running joke at the office. It's like I can make tables, and that's pretty much it. Otherwise, I'll just hand it off to the front end guys because they're pretty awesome. So other interests, clearly, I'm into FC Dallas, which is our Major League Soccer team here in DFW, Texas Rangers, Dallas Mavericks, really any local sports teams, I'm all for it. And then when I do have time, I kind of play some 2K and some FIFA, which is pretty sweet. So let's kind of dive into what we're going to do today. So today we're going to be talking about Laravel 5 and 5.1. Laravel 5 rolled out several months ago, I think close to like January or February, and it was a major overhaul from 5.2. So in 5 they kind of introduced form request, middleware, controller method injection, and some other things. One of the cool things that I actually haven't tried that I'd really like to try is Socialite, which Stuart actually demoed at one of the previous meetups. So it seems really cool. It just provides simple OAuth for Facebook and stuff like that. But I haven't personally messed with it. But it seems easy to do. And then 5.1 was released probably about 2 months now. And they just included support for 5.5. They adopted the PSR2 coding standard, introduced middleware parameters. And then I think one of the biggest things for me in 5.1 has really been the new documentation. The site really went through like a major overhaul, and it's a lot cleaner and easier to navigate through. And it's just really nice with examples and stuff like that. And so that's always really sweet. Sorry. Go back in here. So today I'm really just going to be demoing a simple to-do list app, and there's really not much to it. This is basically just a structure, so we have users, and a user can create a list. And then on those lists, users can create items, and that's essentially it. And then so the requirements, you can register users, create lists, and then create to-do items on those lists. So here's kind of just how you do a fresh install for anybody who hasn't really ever done it. We're not going to do it today, but essentially you just have to have Composer and Laravel installed. Globally will be better. And then Laravel provides this really sweet artisan command where you can just do new Laravel and then include your project folder, and it basically sets it up for you. My local setup is set up with Homestead 2.0 and Vagrant. And then migrations. Migrations are just version control for your database, and it allows your team to be consistent across all local environments. And Laravel also provides a sweet migration or sweet artisan command to help you start with that. And then what I'll really be focusing on today is keeping a clean controller. I'm almost borderline OCD about just kind of keeping things clean and organized. So, you know, the controller is one of those things that if you don't really take care of it, it can get super messy and really cluttered really fast. So first we'll focus on kind of slimming the controller with built-in methods that include the auth middleware class and then the request class. And then we'll go through and kind of work through two like middleware and then a custom request that I've created that kind of help, you know, slim that controller down even further. So let's go ahead and start with the demo. And let's see. Stop. And all right, can you guys see my screen still? Yes. Okay. All right. So basically, this is just a to-do app, and it doesn't do much. Like I said, it's just for demo purposes. So here we can do right. So in here, you can basically just create a list, and you know we'll just call this list one, and we'll do honeydews. And then inside list, you can go in and create items. And so here we'll just do wash dishes. We'll add a few in here. So I added twice. And here we'll do, I don't know, a few stuff. I mean, so that's essentially the extent of what the app does. It doesn't do much. It's just kind of for demo purposes. So let's kind of dive into it here. And let's see. So first, we'll start with like a model. The model kind of just defines a table. So here we have relationships that we establish. So user kind of belongs, or user list kind of belongs to a user, and then a list has many items. So here's just a different model and how we establish those lists. And then here we have our routes file. So the routes file kind of establishes the whole structure for the app, all the URL structure. So here we have like the index page, and then we have a route group that kind of defines lists and list items, and then here's our whole auth group, which defines all of that stuff. So let's go into the list controller. And so here, not much is going on. You have your index page, which is basically just shows all of your lists. You have a create where you can create a new list, store where you store, you know, basically store it, and then show where you show the list with the items in it. So as you guys can see here, we're kind of using this auth user everywhere, and so what this does, it basically checks if a user is logged in, and if a user's logged, if they're not logged in, basically we're just going to boot them back to the index page. So that's applied on every method here currently. And so what we can do is Laravel comes with an auth middleware that kind of handles stuff like that. So we can go to kernel here. And so the kernel, what it does, it establishes the middleware for the site. So this protected middleware here, this runs through on every single request. So anytime you do a request, it runs through basically all of these in sequential order, and if it passes through, then you'll get your request. And so if you ever wondered like how check maintenance mode works, that's how it's established here, and it basically just checks the variable, and if it's true, it returns the exception. And then the route middlewares, these are a little more flexible. You can choose to call these whenever you want in different occasions. So you can call these from the routes file, or you can call these from the controller directly. Today we'll just be calling them from the controller. So the way you call middleware is going to be in the constructor method. So we'll do this middleware, and we'll do auth, right? And so we want to apply it across every method on this controller. You can provide different parameters to kind of only apply it to certain things or to exclude it only from certain things. But in this case, auth, we wanted to apply to all things. So as soon as we do that, we can go through and kind of on this, we can delete that because that's already happening. And then instantly, it gets reduced considerably, right? Here we can do the same thing. And then here we can do the same thing, right? All right. All right, so let's go into this store method here. And so what the store method does, it's basically going to grab all input data that gets through. Here it's really just the name. And then it's going to go through validation. So we're going to establish rules as the name is required, and we're just going to do a max of 50. And then here with messages, we're going to provide our custom, like a custom validation message if it fails. And then we're going to go through and create a validator, and then we're just going to provide through the data, the rules, and the messages. And then if that fails, we're essentially just going to go back to the site or to the page with input, and just this will get outputted as, you know, the name is required or max 50. You answer too many things. So from that, what we can do, let's do, and then here we're going to create it, and then if that fails, we're going to return an error, and if everything goes well, we're just going to return back with a success message. Oh. Oh. Okay, I think I just got kicked out. All right.
I still see you. I'm still showing we're broadcasting.
All right.
I see it too.
Yeah, you're good.
That was weird. So yeah, the store method is doing a lot of things. Validation is happening, and then we're creating it. So I don't know about you guys, but before Laravel, validation to me was always something that was like super tedious. It's kind of something that always needed to happen, and I know it needs to happen, but I was like always putting it off to the very end, you know. Almost sometimes I wouldn't even do it, which don't tell nobody that. But you know, before it was just such a hassle that, you know, it was just kind of tedious to do. So with Laravel and Laravel 5 and form requests, it kind of makes things a lot easier to do. So I created a custom form request that's store request. Yeah. And so what this does is it kind of extracts that into a form request. And so here we have messages, which is the same. And then we have rules, which is the same. So basically rules required. And so when it happens here, it's going to come through rules and establish that. So if that passes, it'll go through fine. And there's this authorize method that kind of determines if I guess the user is authorized to make the request. So for this case, we're just going to return true. You can add logic here to kind of make it do a few things before you can actually authorize the request, which I'll kind of elaborate on more in a bit. But yeah, this one's simple enough. It's just checking if name is there, and if that's there, then it's fine. So what we'll do is we'll use controller method injection to kind of type in it here. So we'll do store request, and then we'll do request. And so just by that, if for whatever reason it fails here, it never even reaches this method. And then all this validation is taking place. So instantly, just with doing that, we can get rid of all that, which to me is really cool that you can just do that, because, I mean, that validation almost took up like 10 lines of code, almost 15. And just by kind of type hinting that request, you can automatically just do it there. And then request also does this, I think it extends like this input. So if you want here, instead of using input, you can really just use request. It's like that. So yeah, just considerably, that's already reduced it quite a bit. And then here you're kind of calling the model directly, which is not really ideal. So ideally here you would kind of use a repository. So I've already created a repository, so this repository will go there. And here we have this, where is this store method here. So the store method accepts params, and then it'll grab the user ID just with that, so you don't even have to feed that in. So here we can do list equals this store, and we can do data there. So there we can reduce that. And honestly, we can just do this here since we're not doing anything else with it. So we can reduce more lines. And we're honestly not using this variable anywhere else. Yeah, so we can essentially just do that. Yeah, just with using the middleware and using form requests, we had this method that was almost about 30 lines here. And just by doing a few extra steps, I mean, you're able to reduce that to, I mean, really 4 lines if you want, which to me is really crazy. I don't know, it just looks a lot cleaner. I mean, as simple as this Git is, if you have a form that's 6 fields, I mean, it can get pretty crazy. And there's other ways to implement this, of course. But to me, form requests are just kind of a go-to for me now to do it. So then you have this show method, which is essentially kind of doing the same thing. So what I did here is, what did I do here? So I created another middleware, so user list. So what we're doing in the show method is we're grabbing the ID and finding it, right? And then we're making sure that the currently logged in user is, well, I guess we deleted that, but essentially you could do this, right? And what's cool about the request class is you have user available to you, so you could do that there, and so you have user available, right? But yeah, so we grab the list, and then we make sure that the user ID belongs to the list, essentially. So this, I feel like we could repeat it a few times, so what I did is I moved it into another middleware that's just user list. And essentially I do the same thing. So here, I use the repository to do find, right? So find, what it does, it just grabs the ID and then it accepts relations. And so I do user list with relations, and then I go ahead and check for user ID here, and then I find it, right? And then if that doesn't pull anything back, then I just boot them back to the index page. And then here, I just check that the list actually belongs to the logged in user. And if that's not the case, then again, I just boot them back. So just with that middleware, we can go ahead here and implement it. So this middleware, I think it's user list. Let me check. Yeah, so users list. And so here we really don't want this implemented on every method. So what we can do is we can press in this array and say only on show. At this point, this middleware is only being applied on this show method in this controller. And just by doing that, we can get rid of this. Because we're using that middleware and because we're using request, instead of finding list again after we've validated, what we can do is we can say list equals request list. So we don't have to find it again. And we've already validated that they own the list. And since we're not really using that anymore, we can remove that. And at this point, you're really not doing anything with compact. So what you could do is you could go with list, list. And then if you really want to take it a step further, right, just do that. Yeah, here's just another example with middleware and with the form request. I mean, this again, not much crazy stuff was happening here, but we're able to reduce this from 10 lines to just one, and everything is still happening. And I don't know, to me that's just really sweet that you can do something like that, and your controller is much more cleaner. Like this is the old one, and then this is kind of what you end up with, right? So we'll kind of just go through this other one. This is just a controller to create items, and here we have our middleware implemented the way we want. We can do, requests, everything's simplified. So this users list is kind of what that middleware we looked at earlier. In this case, I do want it applied across everything, so I just leave it like that. I mean, that's essentially it. Well, let me show a work example where I kind of do a little bit more stuff with middleware and form requests. All right, so essentially what we had to do for this app is it was like you had the ability to vote on different things, or vote on submissions, right? So before you can vote, certain things have to take place before we can store the vote. So here we just, we have our constructor, and that's what we're doing. We establish rules outside, so here we're doing email and submission ID. Required email. We included a custom validation for Honeypot. We did, and then we put in this class that kind of validates against a few different things, and so make sure that email can actually receive, emails, and just kind of cuts down on spam and stuff like that. So here we have rules, and so here we're going to validate the honeypot. We're going to find a valid submission, and then we're going to make sure that the submission has like an active status on it. And then in this case, we're tracking client IP, so I'm just basically grabbing the client IP and just merging it into the input. And so once that passes, it goes through this authorize method. And for me, authorize is kind of a little weird to me. Sometimes I'm not sure if I should kind of use like middleware or if I should use authorized. But I think for the most part, I use authorized, and I may be wrong, but it seems to work for me. And so that's what I go ahead and do. So here we just check if there's like a limit on IP. We check if they've ever voted before. We just check if they've tried to vote today, and then if there's like a certain number of times they can vote on a submission, so we just check that. And this one's kind of a little unique because usually you would return false if like the authorized fails. But what I did here is I went ahead and returned true on every case, and then I provide a forbidden message that gets returned. And so then in the controller, I check if that exists, or if that's not null. Then if it's not null, I know it failed. Right? So if all these pass, and I just set it as null, and I do that. I think essentially I did it because I wanted to be able to provide these validation messages. I think easily we probably could have done it as part of rules and done like extend validation stuff. But that's kind of the way it worked out. I really like it. It seems simple enough. There's a lot going on, but it's pretty self-explanatory. You can kind of get through it, right? And then the last thing I want to talk about today is route or middleware parameters. So let's do here. All right. So Laravel provides an artisan command to make middleware, and it's pretty simple. So PHP artisan make middleware. And for the sake of this, I'm just going to say let's essentially just see, like maybe the app is subscription only, right? So we have to check that they're paid before they can actually create a list. So let's create that. All right, so here's your middleware. It's just empty. And so what we do here, the way you pass in parameters to middleware is you're just going to establish middleware let's just say must be paid or paid member, and then you're going to do like a colon, and then you pass in whatever you want. So it's going to be text. So if there was like different levels of membership, we could do like paid, or if they were like a pro kind of account or something. In this case, I'm just going to pass in like a number 1 that they're paid, right? And then I don't really want this applied anywhere except maybe create, and if they happen to get past its store. And I think that has to be right. So let's go to the kernel and let's add it. All right. Yeah, and then so because we're using this request, well, let me backtrack. So the way you pass in the parameter to the middleware is you just add a third parameter, and so we'll just make this paid member. All right, and so essentially here we're going to leverage on create. Let's see. Yeah. All right, so what we can do here is we can grab list by just using the request. So request list, and then we can validate. So if list, I don't know, assuming we added like a paid attribute, right, or a member attribute. So if list member does not equal then essentially we can just boot them out. And that's essentially it. You just pass that in as the third parameter, and then you're able to reference it and do some other crazy things with it. It's pretty cool. I like it. I haven't used it more than just kind of make this example, but it seems like, I don't know, I have a feeling this will change. I feel like it should maybe be a little more structured than just like string-based, but I'm sure they'll provide something a little easier. That's essentially it. Let me go back to my demo. So these are just some kind of the resources I use. Like I said, the first 2 weeks that I was at, can everybody see my screen before I continue? Yep, okay.
Yeah, I can see it.
Sweet. So essentially the first 2 weeks I was at MusicBed, it was just like, you know, watch these videos, and then the website they sent me to was Laracast. So I'm sure a lot of you guys have used Laracast, and Laracast is great. Jeff Wade is a great, he has like a really good way of explaining things to where you kind of get it. I mean, I do have to slow the videos down because he works so fast, but you know, it makes sense. He provides it in an easy way to kind of understand things. With the release of 5.1, their new docs, you know, Laravel docs has become a big resource for me. Just because they provide well examples, you can kind of search for stuff, and it's not as, before it was kind of, the search experience was kind of bad. I mean, if they even had a search experience, I don't think they did. And then lastly, ultimately, in the last few months, I've really started digging into classes themselves to see what they can do. And, you know, a lot of the times docs can't, you know, document everything. So by digging into different classes, like the request class and stuff like that, really been able to kind of get a better understanding of what's going on and how I can leverage this class a little better. And then one of my things, I really like to always kind of find out, you know, what other people use for their setup. So here's kind of a list of my setup. PHP Storm as my main IDE, iTerm, and then Slack, I guess, for team communication. So I guess at this point we can do questions and answer things. I can't guarantee that I'll have an answer for you, but I'll for sure give it my best shot and get an answer to you as soon as possible. Does anybody have any questions?
Yeah, I had a question. I don't know why, but I guess Well, I always used middlewares. I always define them in routes, and I noticed you
Right.
define them in the controllers themselves, which I guess might make more sense because it's contextual to the controller, and it kind of, in some ways, is a little bit weird, I guess, putting them in routes because um, it's kind of like logic, I guess, that's outside the controller, and kind of in a weird way. But I guess I always put them in the routes because it was just so easy to have a route group of a middleware and just like copy
Right.
and paste routes into it. I was just wondering if there was
Yeah,
any
for sure.
reason that you specifically put them in controllers versus routes.
Um, no, not. There's not any specific reason. I think for this example, it just happened to be the case. It's so small that I just put it in the controller. But I've definitely put it in the, routes depending for kind of route group and bigger stuff like that. I think maybe if the scope requires middleware to be outside of just a controller, then definitely in the route.
Yeah, that's
But
true.
there's
Like
no
if you,
specific reason. I think it's more like on a case scenario as far as where I put it. Um,
Yeah, actually, I asked that exact same question in the Laravel Freenode channel, and for that reason, is there gains that you get from one or the other? And really, there isn't. They function both the same way. A lot of people will put them in routes because they look like the Laravel 4 filter groups or filters that you put in routes. And I think it just depends on what your team wants to do. If it's just you, put them wherever you want. But if your team likes to kind of look at the route file and get an idea for what parts of your application are controlled by different types of middleware, it's really easy to see it all on one page in the route, rather than having to dig into each controller and see what middleware it's actually leveraging. But on a technical sense, apparently there's no difference.
yeah, there's no difference.
Great question, though.
yeah, and I guess if you're in a controller, you can see it the other way in that if you're in a controller and you have the middlewares defined in the controller, then you can see everything you need to know about the request coming into that controller in the controller. So it kind of, I guess, depends on if you're spending more time in your routes or in your controllers, I guess.
It actually makes me wonder what happens if you have it defined on a route that then routes to a controller that has it defined.
Yeah, that's true.
That's something to play with.
Yeah, that'd be
Yeah.
interesting.
I guess probably the best is just to either do it in your controller or do it in your routes and stick with one.
Yeah, have a convention, yeah.
Yeah.
For sure. Are there any other questions, Oz?
Not at the moment.
I'm not seeing anything come through my email. Anybody that's watching this broadcast, you can ask any questions. Either hit the meetup page, I'm watching that, or if you want to hit laraveldfw.com/ask, you can shoot something there. We'll get that right now. If you have any questions, if not, that's cool.
I had a question about, I noticed, obviously you're using a repository and there's a lot of talks about repositories. Some people will say, obviously they're dependent upon the type of project that you're using, and, maybe for larger projects they're better, or, different arguments between them. I guess I'm just wondering what your stance is on using a repository over just clicking directly up to the model.
I don't know. It's one of those where, like, I started doing it kind of in the controller and everything in the controller, and probably the first 3-4 months, our senior guy was like, "Hey, don't do that." So a lot of it grew. That habit grew basically from our senior guy. It was like, "Hey, everything kind of do the repo interface kind of thing, and just to do it there instead of don't put model stuff directly into your controller into anything. Always inject the repository, or actually inject the interface."
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because sometimes I'll use like model. I mean, it's not a repository, but I'll use a model to like essentially write like repository-ish logic so that I can just, without having to build out a full repository, you just have methods on the model that you can call which do similar type things.
Right.
like I had the same question months ago. I still wasn't using repositories as much, but lately I have, and I think the best thing that it brings to the table is that it helps you keep your models clean, which is really good. Because you don't put all your logic there. You know, on your model, I think it's a good practice to just have your relationships defined, you know, as is the traditional way to do it with Eloquent. But once you start putting business logic into the model, it starts getting ugly and a bit difficult to maintain. So, and the other thing is binding a repository, you know, with an interface is just makes really good sense, because usually, you know, your repository represents, you know, the entry point to any given resource, you know, whether it be, you know, users or books or whatever. And I don't know, it tends to work nicely in most of the I thought it was kind of overkill to do that, but not anymore. Once you get used to it, because mainly the important thing is to use interfaces as much as possible, and repositories play well with that.
I remember I read Apprentice to Artisan when I was first getting into Laravel 4, and you know, one thing that really struck me there, coming from the world of MVC, and that was just how things always went. And then on my day job, I work with EXTJS, which is a Cincha JavaScript framework, and they, you know, everything was MVC based, and then they moved to like a model view model type approach, an MVVM pattern, and that just kind of shook my concept of, you know, different ways you can architect these frameworks for how you do controls in your application. And so when I read Apprentice to Artisan, when Taylor in there basically recommended, hey, I put controllers, models, and views in place, but really I recommend the first thing you do when standing up a Laravel 4 app is delete the model directory. It was just kind of like, that doesn't make any sense to me. And I think the road he was going down there is that when you try to think of models as representing your real-world objects, then you build for that model. And like Osvaldo was saying, you end up making it really logic-heavy. And you know, thin controllers, heavy models is a lot how the MVC approach goes. But when you get rid of the model concept altogether and force yourself to think of your classes in a different way, it kind of broadens your horizon to, oh, you know, I can actually write an abstract here, or I can use an interface, and then what I'm doing is defining a contract that whatever class is going to implement that interface is going to adhere by it, and the logic that goes on over there is up to that class to define, and it moves you away to allow yourself to abstract out to the business logic you're defining, and you're much better expressing yourself in that manner than you are trying to cram everything into what you think a model might or should be. So for me, that's kind of my big takeaway on heading the repository route, is just like, just stop thinking of things as models and think of things differently. And I imagine 2 years from now, I'll even consider repositories a little differently than I currently do.
Yeah, that's a good
At least
point.
I hope so.
Yeah. Yeah, it's almost like I guess like models are, you know, before we were having, you know, when you didn't have models, you were just talking directly to the database. And then we abstracted it to models. But now it's like models are, you think of those as just the database, because they've, you know, they basically are the same things now in our minds, especially in Laravel. And so now you're abstracting back even farther to your repositories, which essentially just are another way of interfacing a table. So I guess, yeah, it makes sense in that way to, you know, push your logic out further and further, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah, I like that perspective. That's a good approach.
Yeah. Sweet. Any other questions come down?
We're either having some major technical difficulties and we're not getting
No, I was muted. I muted myself and then so I was asking, like, do we have questions from the public?
Yeah, that's actually what I was speaking to. Is either they can't get them to us, or they're all gun shy. So nothing's coming through.
Yeah. We'll try to make
awesome.
a better job that next time. But basically, I think we're getting to the end of the hangout, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So could you tell us, Daniel, where people can find you on Twitter?
Yeah, sure. Let me share my screen again because it's probably the best way to do it. Um, so on Twitter, people can find me here at essentially my name, except the 3 at the end. I try to throw some development stuff in there. Most of it's just crazy stuff. But yeah, every once in a while there's a Laravel-related tweet. And then my email, and then my website is there. But honestly, I think it's still like the Laravel, welcome page. That's probably just changing my name. It says my name instead of Laravel 5.
Just using Laravel as a homepage generator.
Essentially, yeah. I think that there's a branch with everything on it, but I haven't finished it, so it's still not up.
Nice.
Yeah.
Cool.
That's
So
it.
what about you, Seth? Where can we find you?
I'm at Freshie Seth on pretty much everything: GitHub, Twitter, Instagram, the Facebooks, whatever. That's Freshyseth.
Cool. Stuart?
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter at Stuyam, Stuyam, or I guess on GitHub at Yamartino, Yamartino.
And you can find me everywhere as Obrignoni. I'm gonna put it there on the chat. GitHub,
That probably would.
name it. So for those of you who might not be familiar how we do these meetings monthly, basically it's the first Thursday of each month, and we do one online and one in person here in DFW, Texas. So we are this is the online version for August. Next one in September is going to be in person. So we go back and forth doing that. I think it works really well for our community. So for those of you out there who have any questions, you can just hit us up on Twitter or any other email, whatever, and we're here to help as much newcomers as much as experienced developers share ideas, all that stuff. So I want to thank you all. I want to thank Dan for that presentation. It's pretty awesome, and everyone out there watching. And so I guess we'll see you soon on the next Hangout.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Dan.
Thanks a lot, guys. Keep an eye on the
See you
meetup
guys.
page.
Thanks for having me.
Bye, guys.
All right.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.